Thank you for listening today on Revealing Wholeness, sponsored by Infinity Whole Health. Check out our website at infinityWholeHealth.com, where we are revealing the eternal in each individual, the infinite in the individual. The creativity is made manifest. Limitation is let go. Now, here's your host, Dr. Troy Munson.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Troy Munson. This particular podcast is really probably going to be one of my all-time favorites. And this is an experience that, there's experiences in your life that you have that just, they're so profound, and they're so vivid. It's like, wow, I will remember this forever, I think. And I want to preface this particular podcast by reporting an experience I had in school and then fast forwarding to my daughter. And this particular podcast is on setting a nursemaid's elbow. Well, it's a dislocated elbow is what it is. And I'll explain just briefly what it is first so that you kind of have an idea. Anybody who's been a parent long enough and had enough kids may have experienced this, though this is not necessarily all that common, though it's not uncommon too. So if you have a child that is kind of pulling away from you and you resist and pull back, sometimes they'll try to pull in such a way that the elbow, where the ulna and the radius come down the arm or from the hand and connect at the elbow, the main elbow that we consider our elbow, if you've ever hit your elbow, that's the ulna. It's a bigger, thicker bone, but the radius is sitting right beside the ulna, and it rotates or moves in a little fossa or an indent, which is a fossa or a little indent in the ulna, and it has a little ligament around it that holds it in place so that it stays there. But in a child, it doesn't have a groove on the radius, and so it can slip off the radius if you pull the arm too hard. And thus it's called a nursemaid's elbow, because you'd have these nursemaids that would be working with these children, and of course children have a little will of their own, and the nursemaid would grab the arm of the child and yank them, and they'd dislocate their elbow. And so thus it was called a nursemaid's elbow, because the nurse did it. In school, I was at this clinic that's way outside of school, and I'm making my rounds there as a chiropractor. It's a truck stop. When I was making my rounds there, this gal brings in her daughter, and she's like not moving her arm at all. And she's like, she was hanging from the monkey bars and her hand slipped off, and then she kept holding on with the other one, and then it slipped off, and then she was screaming. She basically hit the ground, and then she's holding her arm. And I'm like, oh, and the doc there that was running the clinic, he's like, wow, I don't know. And I said, I think it's a nursemaid elbow. We just got trained on this. And he goes, it's a nursemaid's elbow. And I said, yeah. And I said, the only problem is they told us how to set it, and I don't remember. So here it is, 1993, and I am frantically calling my buddy who I hope is home, because there's no cell phones. And I get a hold of him. Glenn, how do you set a nursemaid's elbow? And this is one of my good buddies, Glenn Kane, and he's a chiropractor in Ohio, even as we speak right now in Columbus. And he says, he goes, oh, let me look it up. And so he gets his notes and he says, okay, you're going to grab a hold of the elbow and you're going to turn the palm out and bring the back of the hand toward the chest. I said, great, wish me luck. And so I hang up with him and I said, let's see if we can set the elbow. And so I'm sure at that time I was 24. I look like I am 17, and she's like, who is this pretend doctor? Anyways, I take this little girl's elbow, and I remember rotating her hand and bringing it to her chest, and it literally was just like they taught us. It felt like a rubber band snapping under the skin. Wildest thing I've ever experienced. And she cried because it's painful to reset, but within about 45 seconds, she was fine, moving her arm. And I can still remember our teacher saying, when you set the arm, you'll laugh because as the child walks out the door or the parents are carrying out the child will wave to you with that arm. And darn it if she didn't do that exact thing. It's like, this is the craziest thing ever. And so then fast forward now 13 years. I have not set a nursemaid's elbow since I was in school. My mom is at my house. We're on kind of a busy street, and my daughter wants to smell these flowers that are right by the road. And my mom's holding her, and my daughter leans down and she kind of firmly holds her a little bit harder, and Raven is pulling, and all of a sudden she's crying. And she's not moving her arm. And my mom is like, I didn't do anything. I said, Mom, I don't think you did. I believe you. And I said, it's probably nursemaid's elbow. So I go to set it, but it doesn't set. Now I'm second guessing my memory, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. And so I try again, and it doesn't set. And I look at my wife and I'm like, maybe she did dislocate her shoulder, but I don't. She's holding her shoulder so funny because she's trying to keep her elbow so still. I couldn't tell the difference. She's 2.5. And I said, let's go to the hospital. And so we go to the hospital, and he goes and grabs onto her wrist and her arm and tries to set it. He's just moving it around. I'm thinking, and Raven is beet red. Her mouth is open. She is shaking in a scream that cannot escape her throat because it hurts so bad. The doctor steps away and goes, didn't really set. And I said, yeah, that was my experience too. And she goes, I'll be right back. And she's like screaming and wailing at this point. And I looked at my wife and I said, that dude is not touching my daughter again. And he has no idea what he's doing. I at least have some modicum of idea. So we walk away from that visit, and she sleeps that night, and I don't know what else to do. I'm not sure how to set it. The next day, my wife had an appointment in a city like 25 miles away. And so we take Raven with us. We get there, and Raven's still not moving her arm. It's been like 24 hours. I know the longer it waits, the more inflamed, the worse it gets. I don't know what to do. So I'm watching Raven. My wife's in with this other doctor, and we're just at an appointment. And I think she's pregnant at this point with our son. And so Raven falls. She somehow falls, and she cries. And I'm holding her, and she gets up, and I'm watching her do what I'm describing you, and it's still almost disbelieving to me. She looks at her arm. She looks at the floor. She looks at her arm. She looks at the floor. She gets this this look of determination on her face because she knows what's coming. And she throws herself on the floor and sets her elbow. She literally lands on her arm and sets it. She's crying. I'm holding her. And within about, it's like 5 minutes, she starts to use it. She's grasping things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just witnessed innate intelligence that we would call God, that we would call whatever spirit is within us, that drives us, that directs us, that keeps us from harm, and is so powerful. She fixed it herself. I was just like, I was in awe. And in about 15 minutes, she's completely using her arm. Jeannie comes out, and I'm telling her about it through tears. I can't even believe it. And it's just the darndest thing. The tough thing about this whole story, I wish I could tell you that it ended there. But Jeannie calls me, and she goes, I just pulled on her arm, and I dislocated it again. I think it's the other arm. I'm at Fred Meyer's. I said, bring her to the office. Let's do it the soonest we can. And so this time I've already researched it. I know that I was doing the right thing the first time I tried to set it. But her arm, I don't know why, it is just the hardest elbow to set ever. And let me describe to you again, when I set the first one, I literally turned her hand, brought it to her chest, and it snapped into place. It was almost no motion whatsoever when I set this little girl in the clinic in Iowa. Ravens. I looked at her, I said, I said, are you ready? And of course, we're both crying at this moment. And I turn her hand palm out and push it to her chest. And I am turning her little hand. I tell you, I can't believe her bone did not break. I am turning it so hard. And it finally snaps into place. And I'm like, with a sigh of release, it's like, I'm done. I feel like I'm giving birth. And she's starting to at least be better. And and she's starting to stop crying. I said, it's in. And I wish I could tell you this was the last time. But then I'm holding her hand. She's leaning out the back door because it's a step down. She's grabbing something. And I felt it go again. This is like 2 months later. And I immediately set that one. And it was painful, but not as bad. And then one more time it happened. It happened 4 times in I think 2 in each elbow, maybe 3 in one, but it was both elbows at one point in time. And it was just like, you feel like the most horrible parent because I have to turn her arm so hard. I feel like I'm going to break it each time. It was just like nothing I've ever experienced. And then what's funny is when Raven's probably like 7 or 8, it's not going to happen anymore because now she's got the groove. And one of our friends at church is like, so-and-so just had a nursemaid's elbow. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's brutal. She goes, you wouldn't believe it. The doctor's like, she's probably going to cry a lot. It's going to be really painful, but we're just going to do this quick as we can. Does a maneuver, sets her arm, and the child just looking at it the whole time. Like nothing. I'm like, I guess for every child that it's really brutal, there's a child that it's really effortless. How fascinating. And so it just is the wildest thing, nursemaid's elbow. And it's crazy. You can't even believe it. But to watch her fall on her own elbow was just amazing. And not to dissuade or not to talk bad about the medical profession. You just don't see them that often to know the right mechanics to do it often enough. But it's something that I will forever remember because it's like, man, you want to be in and out because it's just painful on most kids, but it's really fast and it's typically really easy. And so there's kind of a long and short, but a wild ride nursemaid's elbow story for you. So hope that was helpful. Until next time, I'm Dr. Troy Munson.